Hi guys, welcome to Cake and It's Special. My name is Lauren and this week I have made a Cruella de Vil cake. So here we go. Now I've not gone for Emma Stone, I've not gone for Glenn Close, I've just gone for a Lauren Cruella de Vil. I start with round vanilla cakes. My biggest ones are 5" and they start getting a little smaller. I stack them up, starting with the biggest, using vanilla buttercream in between each layer. Then I start carving it so that it tapers out as it goes down, like an A shape. Then I can give the whole thing a crumb coat. Put it in the fridge for around 20 minutes before adding a second layer of buttercream. Now I leave the cake aside so I can start on the body. For this I take some modelling paste and add a little bit of Sugar Flare Skin Tone Food Gel. I start with a teardrop shape and pull out a neck and flatten off the shoulders. Then flatten out the chest and pull in the waist. I use my knife to cut it to size, then use my fingers to work in her boobs. Then when I've worked it out through her body, I can use my sculpting tool to push in the collarbone. When I'm happy with that, I can then insert it into the top of the cake. For her dress, I wanted there to be a ruffle effect at the bottom. So I roll out some white fondant into a long thin strip, then place it on my petal pad so I can use a cone tool to ruffle it up. Then when I add it to the bottom of the dress, I slightly overlap it as I work my way around. I decide to put her dress on in 2 sections. So I roll out some black fondant and cover the front, cut a clean seam, then the back and join the seams together. I wouldn't normally, but it was so hot in my kitchen when I made this cake that the fondant and buttercream were making things so difficult. I neaten off the bottom as well where I've added them ruffles, so you can still see them. When I'm happy, which is hard for a cake decorator during a heat wave, I cut a sweetheart neckline and a lower back. For her head, I start with a ball of my Cruella Skin Tone modelling paste. I run my finger across the centre and then use my fingers to start with some eye sockets. I work in a nose. I want her to have a pointy nose, and I pull down a chin and push in some nostrils. I swirl in her mouth. I feel like she needed a big evil toothy grin. So I draw it in and then I use my knife to pull out the mouth, so I can refill it with white modelling paste. I use my balling tool to deepen the eye sockets, then take some white modelling paste and make them into tiny petal shapes and place them into the eye sockets. I add some lines to the corner of her eyes as well. I feel like Cruella spends a lot of time doing her evil laugh, which has created these lines near her eyes. I roll out some tiny cords to outline her mouth for her lips. and give her some eyelids, and then I can paint on her face. I give her blue eyes and of course bright red lips with food colouring. Then I switch to dry dusts. I give her some blush and some red eyeshadow. I roll out some tiny cords of black fondant that are thinner at both ends and stick them on for her eyelashes. Now back to the gels, I paint in some mascara, some eyebrows and some pupils. I found that the more I added to her face, the more she looked like Cruella. When I'm happy, I can then stick her head onto her body. I'm doing her arms in two sections, you'll see why later. So I take a tube and cut it in half, then using the rounded edge at either side, I stick them on for the shoulders. Now I roll out a big piece of white fondant and stick it to the back of her skirt. I take more white fondant and cut out a strip which I fold over and then stick that to the top of the skirt. But where it gets to the arms, I'm going to lift it up to meet where I've cut it off. So just use some water to stick all that in place. You want it to look like it's fallen naturally. Now I take some red modelling paste and roll it into a cord for the arms. I use my finger to work in a wrist and then flatten out the hand. I take my knife and cut out a triangle for the thumb and separate the rest of the fingers. I position them how I want them and then stick them under that sash that I've added to meet up with the other part of the arm. When I've got the arms in place, I add some ruffles to the top of her dress along the neckline in the same way that I did at the bottom of the dress. Does that all make sense? Now for her Cruella hairdo, I take some little pieces of white fondant, form it into long teardrop shapes and twist them into curls and add them to her head individually. I keep going until I get to the centre of her head and then, you guessed it, I switch to black fondant. I give her a couple of red earrings. Now this wouldn't be Cruella without animal prints. So I take some more of my black and paint on some Dalmatian spots on the white section of her dress. Now I have to leave this to dry completely overnight. The next morning I paint a layer of piping gel all over the black part of the dress and then cover the whole thing in edible glitter. But it is very important to let her dry overnight because otherwise like all the makeup and stuff you've painted on, or all the spots, they're all going to get covered in glitter and you will not be able to remove it without ruining your entire cake. Cruella's outfits are very extravagant, aren't they? So I thought this would help to take it to the next level. And there she is. I really loved making this cake. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. If so, please do subscribe to this channel. I bring you a new tutorial every single Wednesday. So I will see you next week. Thanks guys, bye.